keep swinging the axe and keep chopping wood, if you will, and eventually the tree will fall and you'll be back, day after day after day, and stick to the process and keep practicing and keep grinding, and eventually, if you keep swinging the axe, the tree's going to fall.
Hey, welcome to IndyStar.com. I'm Stephen Holder here with Zach Keefer, and we're back. It is Chopping Wood. You've waited all week for this. We know that you can't even focus on your day because you just want to know when the next episode is dropping. And I have millions of emails in my inbox, obviously, asking me what's going on. So we're back, and the world can continue turning, Zach.
And the Indianapolis Colts looked like the Indianapolis Colts on Sunday. I didn't think they looked much different than they did throughout training camp.
So you're not a big fan of fire drills, which is what the game looked like in some cases on Sunday?
More or less. But there were some positives.
There were. Look,
maybe we should be glass half full this season.
That's so hard for me. It just goes against everything I believe in. I'm just really a negative person by nature. It's more fun. But in all seriousness, I've told people, I think on social media after that game, look, if you don't know and you were smart and didn't watch, the Colts lost their preseason opener to the Detroit Lions on Sunday. And what I told people after that game was, hey, just don't read too much into this.
Right.
Like, don't even try to figure out what just happened. Because, A, you can't make sense of it. You can't. And B, it's just mush, okay? It doesn't mean anything. They're not trying. They're really just they're evaluating guys on an individual basis.
There's little to no game plan.
Yeah.
It's not a real mirror of what an NFL game is like. So, yeah, you do have to sort of put that disclaimer out there. But, hey, positives, the defense, the first team defense made a play. Vontae Davis, who I've thought has looked great all of camp.
Yeah.
As good as I've ever seen him look in a training camp setting, forced the interception. John Simon was the one who eventually grabbed it. I don't know if we saw them maybe one or two series after that, but not much. That was encouraging. Mm-hmm. This is a team that needs turnovers in the worst way. So that was a start. But then, pretty much all downhill after that.
Yeah, I think
until Stephen Morris came in the game. That is, I will say that.
The legend that is Stephen Morris, the third-team quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts. Really, he's fourth, if you really think about it, because there's some guy named Andrew Luck who's still on the roster who we shouldn't forget. We'll get to him in a second. But, yeah, I thought that offensively I didn't take away very much from that game because, as I stated earlier, I think on one of our videos, I think I might have said this on the radio this morning, one of the things that you need to really evaluate the offense is, first downs, right?
Yeah.
And until you can sustain a drive, you don't really know what you're looking at. You get in there, it's 3 plays and they're out. Three plays and they're out.
And look, Jeremy Vujnovic is not going to be on this team's starting offensive line when they get to the season. I don't think Deshaun Bond is either, although Chuck Pagano did say it's not too big for him. So that's, continues his annual tradition of saying it's not too big for insert name of rookie 3, 4, 5 years in a row.
That really is just code for he chops a lot of wood.
Yeah,
it really is.
More or less.
And that's why we love Chuck Pagano, because he's so predictable. But, hey, without him, what would we call our podcast, right? So, glass half full, see? There I am, being positive. But, yeah, that was a tough game. I think offensively, like I said, the hard thing for me is, what are you really evaluating there? You're evaluating a backup quarterback, backup offensive lineman, T.Y. Hilton really not getting involved. It's really not anything that you can draw any conclusions on. So I'm not necessarily excusing the fact that they couldn't get first downs, okay? Yeah. Because that's not a good thing.
I mean, Tolzien went 2 for 5 for 11 yards and didn't look good and hasn't looked good since we got here.
He played about how we'd expect him to play, right?
In the end of July, and
which is not good.
But we got a long way to go, and I understand that. But at what point do you start to wonder about a couple things we'll talk about today on the podcast? Depth is a concern, mm-hmm. I think we saw that on Sunday. And then, the most glaring issue right now with this team is obviously Andrew Luck's shoulder and how the backup quarterback situation is handled moving forward. And we did have a long talk with Jim Irsay on Sunday afternoon that really gave us the biggest update we've had so far.
Right, so let's get to that. And, I mean, you pretty much know, I assume by now, what was generally said there if you sort of weed through all of Jim Irsay's hemming and hawing. So basically what I took away from it was they don't know. And I actually believe it. Okay. Now, I know in sports, when it comes to injuries in particular, we're sort of programmed to not believe anything we hear.
Absolutely. Especially with this team.
Absolutely. And they have a track record of not being completely – they haven't lied to us about Andrew Luck as much as just like left out a lot of details over the last couple of years.
And updates, etc.
Sure.
Although Andrew did lie to us immediately after it happened.
Yeah.
And they haven't been completely honest. Now,
2
through
years
this
ago.
process, through after this surgery this offseason, they have not lied to us. So we'll give them the benefit of the doubt.
Right.
Your takeaway was they don't know. I agree with you on that. But to play devil's advocate, maybe he's going to be ready, and they just don't want to put the pressure on. Maybe Irsay, when Irsay said maybe he's ready September 10th, maybe he's ready September 20th, maybe they're under the expectation he's going to be back because Scott Tolzien has looked so bad. It makes me wonder what they're doing in there.
I don't know. I will say
I don't think you can win a game with Scott Tolzien.
Yeah,
way
I
he's
think it's
playing right
hard.
now.
It's going to be really hard. And I think here's the bottom line with Scott Tolzien, and this goes for a lot of backups, but from what we've seen of Scott Tolzien, what we know of him, right? I mean, he's almost. I think he's 30 years old or about to be 30 years old. So it's not like we don't know who Scott Tolzien is. Like the guy is who he is, right?
We know. Yeah.
I mean, he threw a few passes in Green Bay, and was like tolerable, right? And then we saw one game of him last year as a starter, and he was good enough to not lose a game, but he wasn't good enough to win one. And that's what he is. He's a guy who probably won't make a ton of mistakes, but he's not good enough to win the game. And Andrew Luck is most certainly good enough, and he's done it time and time again. So how different is your game plan? How different is your outlook and your play calling and everything when that's the quarterback situation, when you go from having a guy who can go out and make a play to win you the game versus a guy like Scott Tolzien who you can say, all right, hey, run this, this, and this, and he'll execute it. And he knows the playbook,
Right.
and he can take coaching and do what he's asked to do. He just has so many limitations that you have to have reasonable expectations.
And the other way to look at this from Jim Irsay's conversation with us on Sunday is look, the expectations for this team may have been lowered a little bit. I think throughout the building there's
Finally.
an understanding that this is going to, one, take time, and two, the most important thing above all is Andrew Luck's health, and they're not going to rush it. And if that costs them a couple games, so be it. And that's not how Jim Irsay has operated in years past. That is the exact opposite of how they've thought. But it goes back to that patience. And he talked about this, and this is a couple things that I wrote about this morning. He said this is the next 10, 12, 14 years of our franchise, God willing. So that's what they're thinking about. If that means 2017 as a 6-10, 8-8 season, we'll take it. And he's mentioned this, and you remember this as well. If he has to have a couple 8-8 years, if it means getting to the mountaintop twice, which is obviously his holy grail, multiple Super Bowls, that might be something for Colts fans to keep in mind, keep in the back of their mind as we move forward. This team might be willing to be mediocre at best in 2017 if it means the long-term payoff is coming, which they believe it is.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question that at least Jim Irsay and Chris Ballard are on board with that. And this is a situation where I almost feel like Chris Ballard is having a positive influence on Jim Irsay here to some extent, because Chris Ballard, he is not in any hurry. Look, I'm not saying that he's not a competitor. That guy wants to rip your heart out, and he, from what I've heard, and I know you've talked to people too, and from what I've heard, like the guy is the ultimate competitor, right? I mean, this is a guy who like broke his collarbone on a tackling dummy when he was a defensive backs coach or receivers coach,
And then finished the drill.
Yeah, like he's not exactly normal, okay? So don't think like Chris Ballard sitting up here, with in a shirt and tie, just sort of, with his legs crossed, sitting back, just sort of twiddling his thumbs.
He sees what we see.
Yeah.
He sees a team that's extremely flawed right now. Without Andrew Luck on the field, it's extremely flawed. And that
think
cannot sit well with him.
I think he has been extremely honest about his roster, both in on the record and off the record conversation. So I don't think he's sitting here under some impression that, you know what, we're fine. We'll if it takes a couple years, so be it. No, he wants to win now, and he knows his team's not there. But but at the same time, he's also a very realistic guy.
Right.
And I think that's healthy. The general manager has to take that long view. He has to be a guy who's willing to sacrifice now for the benefit of later, and he's willing to do that. He, I think, has proven that. And so Jim Irsay needs to hear that sometimes, okay? Mr. Multiple Super Bowls.
Right.
Mr.
Right.
We only won one with Peyton.
Right.
Like-
Mr. Let's open up the checkbook in 2015 and sign as many veteran free agents as we can, and in the hopes that it'll get us one game further. And well, that didn't work out.
Yeah, and Mr. I'm going to invoke Al Davis in my press conference after the draft. Like,
Right.
what?
Right.
Okay, so yeah, I think it's a healthy thing. Now, we can talk about how that squares with Chuck Pagano and his future, and that's a whole other story. And obviously there's different issues there, but it is the right way to handle it. And Jim Irsay has, I think, come around the last couple of years to understand that he had some really good fortune in getting Andrew Luck to begin with, okay, just like he had good fortune in getting Peyton Manning, and it just doesn't happen, okay?
Yeah,
It
and
doesn't just happen.
It was a
It's
mirage.
process.
What happened early, and that was sort of what got them off the rails to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
Those 11-win seasons that just kept coming, and you think you're really close, and in reality, the team was built improperly. It wasn't built the right way. The lines were just abysmal, and that's one of the biggest reasons it came back to bite them. But we're getting off topic here.
Yeah. We can go all day on that, and we have in some cases. But anyhow, getting back to Luck, I think the bottom line here is before we move on to the other topics, the bottom line with Andrew Luck is they really don't know, or at least we think they don't know.
Yeah.
We're inclined to believe them, and however, I do think we're getting to a point where we're going to have a better sense pretty soon, because if I don't see Andrew Luck in the next 10 days or so, I'm going to start to feel pretty doubtful about his odds of playing.
In the first week.
Yeah. I'm talking season opener.
I agree.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't surprise me if he was pulled off the pup relatively soon. We know he's throwing, but we know they're being very, very, very patient with this. So,
right. That's just one step in several steps.
Correct.
Is coming off of the physically unable to perform list.
T.Y. Hilton made this statement today, and you can believe him for what he's worth. He said it would only take him a couple days to get back on the same page.
I don't buy
Maybe
it.
he can say that because he's been playing football
Exactly.
for the last 3 months. Andrew Luck has not. He has not been playing football at all. No practice, nothing with his receivers. When he throws to them for the first time, it will be the first time he's thrown to them since January 1st.
Right.
And I don't care how good Andrew Luck is. It's going to take some time. It's going to take a couple weeks.
Yeah.
We'll see what that's at, but obviously nothing is more important right now than whenever he returns.
Yeah. I'm not buying it. So we touched on the preseason game. Before we turn the page on that, let's do this. Who was one guy in that game, and it doesn't have to be a headliner, but who's one guy in that game you feel like, okay, there's something to build on there with that guy. I like what I saw. Was there one guy? Was it JoJo Natson? Was it?
It was definitely Jeff Locke, the punter.
Yeah. No. I'm actually
semi-kidding.
No, I'm with you on that.
But I actually
he had a good day.
He had a great day, and Rigoberto, the other punter, did not have a great day. And I actually chatted with Pat McAfee a little bit, who was watching the game live. And usually what Pat said was when they rotate kicks, that means there's a punting competition. I didn't think they were in any sort of punting competition. I thought this is Jeff Locke's job, from what I know about punting, which is all from Pat McAfee. Jeff Locke, absolutely.
Wait, you're not an expert on NFL punting?
Right. I've learned a lot from Pat McAfee over the years on the position.
Yeah.
But Jeff Locke stood out. You're really reaching when you're singling out the punter. Nothing against punters. JoJo Natson flashed. He's just so fast, difficult to talk to. Yeah. Difficult to tackle. I enjoyed talking with him later this week and for a story sort of about his road to the Colts. Other than that, it was hard to find something that stood out. The Raven Clark struggled on the offensive line. The quarterback struggled. T.Y. Hilton wasn't really a factor. Bug Howard, who's been great in camp, didn't really do much. Other than the first team defense, I can't really find any, huge impressive plays from anybody.
All right, fair enough. So one thing that preseason does do is it sort of crystallizes to some extent your strengths and weaknesses. So let's start with the latter. Let's talk about our concerns that came out of that game. I'll go first. I mean, for me, there's a couple of things. I'm not seeing the pass rush. Not that I ever thought they were going to have one, okay, or at least a good one, but I don't see any pass rush. So that's a concern.
It's 2016 all over again.
Yeah, it's just really hard to overcome that. Now, granted, Ted Monachino is not going to get cute in the preseason, right? He's probably got an array of blitzes that he's going to use, I would hope, because I thought last year he got too vanilla.
That's a good point.
Yeah, and that's every team, of course, but they don't have guys who can just line up and just beat somebody off the edge and make a play. Like, they don't have guys like that. So we knew that, and we've talked about that on this podcast, I believe. But that was our first real look at it, and he just didn't see it. I mean, Terrell Basham just hasn't flashed.
He's just not there yet.
Yeah, I think his head's probably swimming, I think. And oftentimes, you've got to tactically, you have to develop at that position so that you can beat guys. You might be physically capable of winning those matchups, but mentally and strategically, there's so much work for you to do that until you put all that together, it's hard to do that.
And that's something he's been very honest about. He said, look, in college you could just out-hustle guys, and he's a big, strong, fast guy. Physically, he fits the mold. And he did that at Ohio. But he said so far right now it's all technique, and that's what's holding him back. So he's got a great tutor, right? Robert Mathis has been out here every single day. And if there's a guy who embodies that technique and those instincts that make players so great at that position, it's Robert Mathis, undersized his whole career. But with Basham, he has not flashed, and the pass rush has not flashed either.
Yeah. And then I think I do not worry, but I guess I wonder about the offensive line, the depth there I think got exposed a little bit. We're going to get into depth here in a little bit. I think that's a topic of conversation at a number of places. But for you, what was the concern that you had coming out of that game?
The line wasn't any better, but it's just really hard to give them a fair shake because you weren't seeing the regular five that we've sseen every day in camp until the injuries occurred, namely to Ryan Kelly. I liked what I saw from Quincy Wilson, and you've touched on this week as well. He was in there battling, and he was making mistakes, but that's what they need to see. Malik Hooker wasn't as active, but he needs as many reps as possible. The inside linebacker spot is not going to be a strength this season. I don't think there's any way it's going to be a strength on the defense.
Did you see, to open the game, I think on the first play from scrimmage, Anthony Walker missed a big tackle there and gave a play. I mean, not necessarily – not a play that puts him in the Hall of Shame necessarily, but that's what you can't do.
Right.
And that's going to happen, I think, with that group.
And then to answer your question, the biggest concern I think with this defense is still going to be the secondary, and simply because you're going to be starting young guys in the back end, and one way or another, Nate Harrison's going to be in there, and Quincy Wilson's going to be in there, and Malik Hooker, and they're going to make mistakes. And Vontae Davis, for all his greatness, is not going to be able to do it as a one-man show. And I just think that group's going to struggle, at least at the start of the season. But we'll see.
Yeah, and what happens oftentimes in a situation where you're really strong on one side but not on the other is it's pretty easy. Right? You pick on the young guy. So those guys are going to get a lot of action, and I thought Quincy Wilson got some action quite a bit in his first game, which is a good thing. If that continues, he better be ready. It probably will continue if he's out there quite a bit. It'll continue, and he better be ready to see the ball a lot and be ready to make a play on the ball.
And that's, as you know, and from talking to players and coaches over the years, that's one of the most demanding positions mentally.
Yeah.
And it takes a long time to get that, be able to shake it off because you're going to get beat. It's just what's going to happen in that position. And so we'll see how those guys mentally, can handle that over the next coming weeks.
Now, on a related note, we're talking about a corner, Quincy Wilson. Let's talk about another quasi corner. So you may have read, or
can we call him a corner now?
Defensive back.
I think maybe we can call him a corner.
So
I don't know.
So we're talking about TJ Green. Okay, we love TJ Green. He is an interesting guy. We love him because he's a topic. He's a good topic for us to talk about because there's so much to talk about. Which is funny for a guy who's really done nothing.
Yeah.
But anyhow, second round pick last year at safety out of Clemson. You know this. And he came in last season, and he was sort of a mess, right? He was a reserve guy. Ended up starting toward the end of the season, I guess.
Clayton Gathers
gets hurt, right? So still hurt. So now we come out here on Tuesday, and TJ Green, we're like, is that TJ Green? What? He's taking reps at corner?
We've seen him in the box before, but this
Sure.
was strictly
He was out
press
wide.
coverage man corner.
He was out wide, lined up on freaking T.Y. Hilton. I
Yeah,
was like,
good luck.
I was like, wait a minute. Did they put the wrong personnel on the field? What's going on here? And sure enough, we asked after practice, and Chuck Pagano was like, yeah, we're going to give him a shot at corner. And TJ, to my surprise, he could not be more thrilled about this possibility.
It makes total sense. I don't mean schematically. It does to a degree, but it makes total sense. And Ted Monachino, to his credit, we really enjoy talking to the defensive coordinator because he calls it like he sees it, and he doesn't baby these guys. And by that, I mean he doesn't.
Truth serum with that guy.
Yeah, he tells you what's going on. And look, his defense was 30th in the league last year, and it struggled, and he told us. But this was a great quote from Ted Monachino today on TJ Green. Why did he struggle last year at the safety spot? Because he was a one-man show. Those are his words. And that's what we saw. And rarely do they actually call it like they see it. But that's what we saw.
And what he means by that, if it's not obvious, is he was freelancing.
He was looking out for himself, looking out for the big hit.
Not playing within within the defense.
Right.
Not playing within the structure. And what happens when you do that? You cost your team.
Yeah.
You hurt your team. And he did that.
And he did. And Monachino explained that he didn't know the structure last year. He knows it now. He has a better understanding of it now. And that's why he was able to, one, play well on Sunday, according to Monachino, and two, they're going to give him a shot at cornerback. Now, he said he's got a long way to go. But look, I mean, looking forward to this team down the line, right? If you're TJ Green, where are you going to play? Malik Hooker is going to be a safety. Clayton Gathers, if he returns to 100% health, is a starting safety, and you're not. So,
and Darius Butler hasn't taken a snap at corner. Okay,
yeah,
he's a safety
and Darius
as far as they're
Butler
concerned.
should not be counted out because he's a pro and he'll be there and he's a steady presence back there and has been since he moved back to safety. So TJ Green, this might be your only shot to get on the field.
And I thought that Monachino also said that. If you go back and look at what he said originally when we first brought the topic up, he said, well, that safety group is pretty deep, I think. And I think we can question whether that's true because the Clayton Gathers situation for me is I don't just pencil him in. But I think what he was saying there is that he's not cracking through that group.
I don't see it happening.
He's not going to rise to the top of that group. And I think they have pretty much made their mind up that that's not going to happen. At least the odds are against it, right? And injuries change things. But I heard a guy who has made a decision that, he's just not there.
My question is, why didn't this happen in March or April or May when they're out here on the field running through non-padded practices?
You took the words right out of my mouth.
It makes total sense to give it a try back then. And look, TJ Green's going to play corner on Saturday in Dallas. It sounds like they're going to throw him in there. So, I mean, that could go poorly or it could go well, but they're doing this on the fly right now in the third week of training camp.
Okay, so if you didn't read this in my story, we asked TJ, so, how'd this happen? And I could not believe my ears.
Talking about on the fly.
Yeah. So he says, Coach Pagano called me down an hour before practice and was like, what do you think about playing corner? And he's like, sure, I'm up for it. All right, let's do it. And you envision, this billion-dollar business with decisions being made and after hours and hours of discussion and deliberation, and no, they just sat there and on an hour before practice said, hey, man, what do you think? All right, let's go for it. Huh? I mean, look.
Physically, he could do it.
Yeah, I don't disagree with the decision.
He's 2'11", he's 6'3", he's fast, he's got length that can make up for, technical deficiencies for the time being.
Right.
Cornerback is tough.
It is.
It's a tough position, and I don't know mentally if he's going to be able to handle the ups and downs. We'll see.
Yeah, I do think that his skill set, just based on what we've seen, his skill set or his decision making for sure is not really geared towards safety because he just hasn't been able to overcome that. I mean, his decision making is one of his biggest issues.
You have to be an instinctual player at the safety position.
And he's not that. Now, I think you can circumvent that when you're playing corner. I really do.
You go get him.
Yeah.
That's what Monachino said today, right? He can just go line up with a guy and
right. Now, he's going to have to learn quite a bit of the zone coverages, and within those coverages, oftentimes you'll have to make decisions based on motions or personnel groups, and you better be right. Sure. So can he do that? We'll see. But I do think that he won't be playing in as much space as he does at safety, where I mean you're certainly in space, obviously playing corner, but you're not 25 yards down the field, okay, or even 10 yards down the field. That's a different approach to the game. I think he's got a shot. I'm not going to say he's going to pan out. I'm not going to say this is going to work, but I think he's got a shot. And the other thing I'd point out is there were a lot of teams that pegged him as a corner coming out of college.
That's a good point as well. Remember, this guy played receiver when he got to Clemson, so he's bounced around into a couple different positions. But, yeah, teams were interested in him as a corner. You can always see why physically, but I'm not ready to say either way. I mean, we'll find out. This could totally blow up in their face, but we'll see. It's worth a shot. We'll see how he does Saturday.
I remember on draft night having to ask Chuck Pagano and Ryan Grigson when they came in for their press conference, okay, like, so what position is this guy going to play? Like, that was, I think, my first question that night.
Right.
And so that reinforces the fact that it wasn't really clear what he was going to play. And that's when they made it clear to us, no, we want him to play safety. But they said, he does have corner ability. So this is not something that they haven't thought about. I know I sort of made fun of how they made this decision, but certainly this has been on the table for a long time. It's just weird how they went about making the final decision. To me, was strange.
It seems strange that it's happening now and not the beginning of camp or whatever. But
that I do think was a missed opportunity. Maybe it has something to do with Clayton Gathers and his status. I mean, maybe they feel good about his long-term prospects. I mean, I don't know, but and certainly they at the start of the offseason they hadn't drafted Malik Hooker yet, so they didn't. It wasn't something they envisioned. But I don't know. That was weird to me. But anywho, we've got other stuff to talk about. We mentioned depth earlier in this podcast. So we learned this week the Colts are out there looking at Jeremy Zuttah, who's just became a free agent. I guess was cut just this week. He's a veteran center, has some history playing guard, but really a veteran center. He's a guy who would cost a little bit of money. They certainly are on the lookout for every position, which is something that Jim Irsay has told us and Chris Ballard repeats constantly. So the depth, what are the areas you're concerned about in terms of depth right now?
Well, I think it starts with the position you mentioned, the offensive line. And look, Denzel Good was not playing. Ryan Kelly's not going to play for a couple weeks. You had Jeremy Vujinovic in at guard. You had Deshaun Bond in at center. Guys that, I mean, have not run with the ones at all in camp until literally, days before the game. So you don't get a fair picture of what the offensive line is going to look like. But as we've seen in camps before, the offensive line can look great in training camp in shoulder pads and shorts, and then look awful in the preseason games like they did last year and the regular season games as they did in 2015. So I'm convinced of nothing when it comes to the offensive line being fixed, quote unquote.
No one said that.
But there was a sharp drop-off on Sunday, and the line did not play well. They did not protect well. I mean, they were pushed in. There was no run game. There wasn't a lot of time to pass. It just makes me wonder. This line's always one play away from a backup being in. I'm not sure if I trust any of the backups, and I'm not even sure if I trust half the starters as well. So, what's new? It's a broken record in this city, but the offensive line gives me pause heading into another Colts season.
Yeah, the one play that sticks with me is it's actually not LaRaven Clark getting beat.
Oh, that's the one. That's the one that jumps out to me.
Well, that one too. That one sticks with me. But it's Jack Mewhort getting bull rushed right into Scott Tolzien on one of those plays, and you're like, wait a minute, you're the guy we're not supposed to have to worry about.
You're supposed to be the most consistent one,
right? And look, this is the life of an offensive lineman, right? One bad play and everyone beats you up for a week, right? I get that.
59 good plays or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, he played 10 plays, right? So
yeah.
I mean, so he was 90%. Okay, but that can't happen. You can't have the guard who you think as an organization is on the verge of being a Pro Bowler. You can't have him get bowled into the quarterback.
He's also playing his third position in 3 years to start the season, so maybe there's something to that as well.
There is that. He's obviously the right guard now after temporarily playing right tackle a couple years ago and being largely a left guard. So and not to mention, by the way, he's snapping in between special teams periods out here just in case.
Another name to throw out there in this regard is their third round pick, Zach Banner. Fourth round pick, out of USC. He's a tackle. He's nowhere near ready to play. I think that's pretty obvious from what we've seen in camp and in the preseason game. He's a little bit like LaRaven Clark last year, and that's not helping the depth of the offensive line for this season. Maybe down the line. But as of right now, it doesn't look like he's ready to play.
Yeah, and one thing I noticed about him, I was watching him in practice a little bit yesterday too. He this is going to sound stupid, me saying this about a guy who's like 7 feet tall.
7'2".
But he plays too high. And that's something he's going to have to really learn to deal with. It's going to be essential for him because he is – how tall is he, Zach? He's what, 6'9"? 6'8"?
6'8", 340.
Okay. So, I mean, there's a reason there aren't many 6'8" offensive linemen in the NFL. I mean, it's a position where leverage – is everything. What do they say? Low man wins, right?
I mean, if you're Robert Mathis in your prime, don't you want to see Zach Banner on the edge?
Yeah. I mean, now granted, you're not going to bull rush him, right? You're not going to run through him.
But if you've got the technique and the moves, you can get around him.
But and that's the thing. I mean, he would struggle with speed rushers, and that's what you're going to see 50% of the time out there. So we'll have to see. I mean, they're putting better and better athletes on the edges these days in the NFL. So that's what you're going to have to contend with, and unless you can play with the right technique and get low and really be the low man, so to speak, it's going to be tough. And,
wow. Banner is listed at 6'9", 358.
Ooh. I think he's probably down a little bit in weight, but you can't get shorter.
So. I said 340 because that's what he told me after minicamp, because that's a huge concern for him, and he's like got a personal chef and all that to make sure he keeps weight. So
that's probably his pre-draft weight that they list him at there.
Right. They don't update these at all.
Not a whole lot. Yeah. But yeah, man, he does have a ways to go. Another position I think that right now they have to worry about, and we hit on this a little bit with TJ Green, is corner. I mean, they've got Rashawn Melvin's down right now. Daryl Morris, I haven't seen practice in a couple of days. I'm not sure what his status is.
Tim Monachino talked about this. He says, look, we are scraping to find our best 4 cornerbacks right now. You know who one of them is. You don't know who the other 3 are. Quincy Wilson, has been active. He's been healthy. He's been there every day. That's a good sign.